Hey, what's up, guys? It's Sam Shaw from Wall Street Mastermind. I'm here today with another Thought of the Day Tuesday. Today, I want to talk about a pretty important topic. It's basically how to answer the "Tell me about yourself" question, or sometimes they ask, "Walk me through your resume." They're kind of one and the same. And usually, this is like the first question that you're gonna get asked in an interview. Okay, it's also, I would say, the most important question because one, it always gets asked, so we call it like a guaranteed question. And secondly, because it's the first question, it's kind of your opportunity to make the right first impression, right? Like if you don't answer this question well, you're not going to make a good first impression, which means you're probably not going to pass the interview because the way that the human psyche works, like what the interviewer is doing a lot of times is they establish a first impression of you within the first, honestly, a lot of people say first 30 seconds, like before you even answer the question. Like maybe like they just looked at your resume, they already have kind of like a predetermined opinion, right? But definitely by the time you finish answering your first question, your interviewer is going to have formed an opinion of you, and the rest of the interview, they're kind of just um, the way the human mind works is like they're just looking for more evidence to validate the first impression or to validate that initial opinion that they've already formed about who you are as a candidate, right? So, in other words, if they really like you, based on your first question, they're probably gonna go a lot easier on you for the rest of the interview. They're gonna cut you more slack. Like even say if later on in the interview you mess up on a technical question or something, typically, I mean, people can excuse whatever they want to excuse, right? They might try to rationalize why it's okay that you missed that interview question, because oh, maybe I asked them a question that was like pretty hard. I wasn't expecting to get it anyway, right? Something like that. The opposite is also true, where if you don't make the right first impression and they um, they have a bad first impression of you, what could happen is, let's say for the rest of the interview, even if you knock it out of the park, okay, you answer every single technical question they throw at you, um, and like you answer all the behavioral questions they throw at you. Like it just doesn't matter because they're gonna be nitpicky about it because they're trying to ding you somehow. They're trying to find a reason why, to justify why they can like eliminate you from the process, right? Like basically they don't like you, so they don't want you to move on to the next round, right? So that could be anything. It could literally be like, okay, this guy answered all my questions. He's like a total smartass, or like he's so full of himself, he thinks he's hot shit, and he's just too cocky. He's not a good fit for the culture. Like that's my favorite one. Is like this person's not a good fit for our culture, right? Whatever that means, it's super vague, and no one can say whether it's right or wrong. But it's just like it's the interviewer's call. And so that's why like it's so critical to get this question right, because if you don't get this question right, pretty much nothing else is going to matter, right? So I think we've established the importance of this question, and so let's get into like how you should actually be answering this question. Now, I'm not here to tell you guys like, hey, say this, and then like that's going to be a good answer, and that's going to get you the job, right? That's not how behavioral interviews work. Everybody's obviously going to have different answers. So I'm not here to tell you what to say, but I do want to give you some frameworks around how you should structure your answer, right? So typically, what you would do is you start out by just giving a quick introduction about yourself. So an example of this could be like, hey, I'm currently a sophomore at NYU studying, business or NYU Stern studying business or majoring in finance. I was originally from whatever, San Jose, California. Okay. Then typically what you want to do after that is before you just dive into, oh, these are all the things I've done on my resume and whatever, even though that is kind of like the meat of the question, you want to first, or what we like to have our clients do is start out with some sort of personal, unique identifier, right? Like the interviewers, they're usually interviewing a bunch of candidates all back to back to back to back in a single day, right? And so You want them to remember you. Like if you're not memorable, at the end of the day, when they're discussing, when they're at the round table discussing like who do we like, who do we not like, who do we want to move on to the next round, they have to remember you. Like if they don't remember you, that's a bad thing. That means that you're probably not gonna get picked. Right. So what's a personal unique identifier? So typically we like to talk about something um, that's unique to you that you did when you were growing up. Okay. So what are some examples of that? So for example, some people talk about how they grew up around parents who had started their own business, and that's how they kind of first became interested in business. Some people talk about the fact that hey, they were like sports was a big part of their life. I grew up playing basketball or whatever, like football. It doesn't matter, right? Or it could be something that's like really interesting about you. Or maybe you started your own business, right? Maybe you won some really cool competition, like something that's a big part of your identity. Okay, to just give them a little bit of a flavor of like what type of person you are, right? And you want to be the reason I call this the unique personal unique identifier is later on when they're looking back on all the people that they talk to, they're gonna remember you as, oh, that's the sports guy, that's the basketball guy, or oh, that's the entrepreneurial guy, or that's the whatever, like fill in whatever adjective you want. Like they have to be able to remember you by something. Oh, that's the guy that got the Eagle Scout, right? um, One example, and by the way, when you're doing this, you want to weave in some sort of relevant quality um, about yourself that's like something that you want to highlight, right? So, I mean, what kind of qualities do you typically want to highlight, or like something that's relevant to banking, right? So it could be like your work ethic, right? Like I've had students talk about how hey, growing up all the way through elementary school, junior high, high school, like every single weekend, they would have to go and work for their parents' restaurant business and help out, right? And that helped them develop like an insane work ethic, right? That most kids their age just didn't have, right? It could be like your analytical skills. Like if you're talking about like, oh, I won the math Olympiad, and I'm really, just an analytical person, always have been, right? Could be like intellectual curiosity. Like you want to think about some traits and qualities that bankers really value, and somehow just like tie that into, whatever your unique identifier is, and do that in a natural way. If you don't want to make it seem super contrived and you're really going out of your way to say something cool about yourself, you don't want to do that, right? I think a really good example of like a personal unique identifier that I heard recently is like, I had a client and his dad. So he talked about how his dad founded the family business, or was a co-founder for the family business, and basically they grew it from like a small startup all the way into like a huge like conglomerate. It's like one of the biggest conglomerates um, in the country, in his country. And the way they grew into a conglomerate was through doing a lot of M&A deals, right? So they did a lot of acquisitions. And not only that, of course, that's obviously makes it relevant to banking. So that got them interested in just M&A in general from a young age. But not only that, one of the acquisitions that this company did ended up being a bad acquisition. Like they overpaid for it, right? And because they overpaid for it, it forced them to have to actually sell off their most profitable business unit to a private equity firm, right? Because they needed the cash to like make sure the entire business doesn't go under. And so from that experience, like he saw both the good and the bad sides of M&A, and that just like, and how big of an impact it can have on a business and how transformative it was. And so that's something that he's always knew that he wanted to do, right? And so that's super unique. And of course, like his circumstances allowed him to talk about that. Not everyone has an example like that, so I'm not saying you have to say something like that. But if you can find something like that that's super unique about you, it's going to make you super memorable, and it's going to make it like you're even a side benefit of that is like his why banking is like not just like what everyone else is saying, right? So okay, you have your personal unique identifier. And then after that, you don't want to spend too much time on this first part, by the way. Like I said, the meat of this answer should be like all the things that you've done on your resume, and ideally these are things that you've done after you started college. Because if you did stuff in high school, like look, honestly, it's probably not that significant, and people don't really care about what you did in high school. Okay, so you want to fast forward to kind of like when you started college. Talk about what have you done since you entered college, right? Talk about like the internships and the extracurricular activities that you've taken on. You don't have to mention every single thing. You only want to talk about the ones that you think add something to the conversation, or that you think are relevant to finance, or more specifically investment banking, right? The other thing you want to do is ideally you're talking about these things in a chronological order, and then you have like a logical narrative on why you went from point A to point B to point C, etc., etc. Right? Like what interviewers want to see is like, how did you make the decisions that you made? Like why did you do the things that you've done up to this point? And of course, as you're going through this narrative and moving from point A to point B to point C to point D or whatever, all the way up to present day, like just like where you are right now, you want to show progression over time, right? You want to show how each step of the way you've learned something to make you into a better investment banking candidate than you were prior to that experience, right? And so you're essentially, it's like if you started out here and banking is here, you want to show that you were gradually getting a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer, a little bit closer, up until now you've gotten to where you are today, and now you basically become, as of now, you're a great candidate, which is why they should hire you, right? And then usually at the end of that, at the end of all this, we'll say something in closing, like, hey, and that pretty much brings me to where I am today. Really excited about starting my career in investment banking, especially at a firm like Goldman Sachs. So thank you for having me, right? And so just to like close the loop on my answer and let them know that you're done, right? And so this entire structure that I just laid out, like you probably, ideally you want to probably keep it to like 2 minutes or less. Okay. Sometimes you might be able to go up to like 3 minutes if your answer is like really interesting, really good, and you're super engaging. But you don't want to go too long, okay? Because you're gonna lose the banker's attention span. All right. So pretty straightforward, right? And that's just like a framework. Again, of course, that's not the only way to answer this question, right? But that is like one framework that we've seen that works really well. If you have a different way or something that's like super unique, it could still work. But if you don't really know what you're doing, it could be hit or miss. And so I don't recommend taking a risk like that, especially with this specific question, which is again super important to your chances of passing the interview, right? So hopefully that makes sense for you guys. Again, obviously on a training like this, it's hard for me to tell you guys exactly what to say for your personal situation. So if you are looking for someone to help you actually vet your answers, not only vet your answers, but like write it with you, and help you like structure it and phrase things and make sure you're using the right words and things like that, then feel free to reach out to us and see if you're a good fit to work with us more closely. We do, for every single one of our clients, we do help them actually go through and write every single answer out line by line, right? So if that's something that you're interested in, start by booking a free strategy session with us. You can do that by going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. Again, that's wallstmastermind.com/apply. So the street is abbreviated to ST. Okay, so you'll go on there, pick a time that works for your availability. We have a calendar there, and then we'll hop on and talk to you about what your recruiting situation is, what are your goals, what are your challenges, what do you feel like you need help with, and then if we feel like we can help you, we can definitely talk about how we might be able to help you with that. If not, hey, no worries. We'll just give you some free advice on what we think you should do, or what we think we would do if we were in your shoes. Okay, so either way, our goal is to give you a ton of value when it comes to your investment banking recruiting process, and we look forward to talking to you. All right, thanks guys for watching, and we'll be back again with more of these next week. Okay, bye.